Hey everyone, welcome! I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We're going to be charting the dramatic rise, the devastating fall, and the frankly spectacular resurrection of the world's most recognizable company, Apple. We're going to look at exactly how a scrappy counterculture hobby completely transformed the way we communicate, work, and honestly just live our daily lives.
Okay, let's dive into this because it is a wild origin story. Think about it. We are talking about two young guys literally selling a Volkswagen minibus and a programmable calculator just to fund their very first batch of bare circuit boards. How on earth did that translate into a company whose total value eventually surpassed the economies of entire nations?
Well, to answer that, we're going to follow our roadmap today. First, Garage Days to Wall Street. 2, the Macintosh and the Exodus. 3, surviving the 90s. 4, the ultimate corporate comeback. 5, the mobile revolution. And finally, 6, trillions, silicon, and scrutiny.
All right, kicking things off with Chapter 1, Garage Days to Wall Street.
You know, the entire foundation of Apple relies completely on the dynamic between the two Steves, Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs, who first met back in 1971. Wozniak was this unparalleled engineering genius. I mean, he designed the Apple I computer essentially on paper before building it to show off at the Homebrew Computer Club. But it was Jobs who really had the commercial vision. While Wozniak just wanted to give his schematics away for free, Jobs insisted they sell them. By April 1976, Apple Computer Company was officially founded. And just over a year later, in June 1977, they released the Apple II. What made the Apple II so revolutionary was Jobs' vision. Instead of a messy box of wires meant for basement hobbyists, he wanted a computer ready to run right out of the box, complete with a plastic case and a built-in keyboard. He wanted to put a computer in your home. And wow, did that vision pay off. By December 1980, Apple went public. They generated over $100 million in capital. To put that into perspective, that was more than any IPO since Ford Motor Company back in 1956. By the end of that very first day of trading, the stock price had created 300 millionaires overnight. The garage days? Yeah, those were officially over. Apple was a giant.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the Macintosh and the Exodus.
So, with massive scale comes massive internal friction. To survive against corporate titans like IBM, Apple desperately needed experienced leadership. So Jobs targeted John Sculley, a high-level executive at Pepsi. To lure him over in 1983, Jobs delivered this legendary pitch. He asked him, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or come with me and change the world?" It worked. Sculley became CEO. But in bringing Sculley on board to help fight IBM, Jobs had unknowingly set the stage for his own removal.
What's really interesting about this is how perfectly it visualizes the ideological rift that just tore the company apart. On one side, you have John Sculley, pushing the reliable, highly profitable Apple II with an open architecture, meaning outside companies could easily build parts for it. On the flip side, Jobs was completely obsessed with the Macintosh. This was a closed machine where Apple controlled every single piece of the hardware and software experience, driven by a brand new graphical user interface and a mouse. The Mac was revolutionary, famously announced with that dramatic Super Bowl commercial in 1984, but its initial sales really slowed down due to high prices and a lack of software. The tension between Sculley and Jobs boiled over. By 1985, the board sided with Sculley. Stripped of his operational duties, Steve Jobs actually resigned from the company he co-founded.
Which brings us to a pretty dark era. Chapter 3, Surviving the 90s.
With Jobs gone, Apple entered a very different reality. While the Macintosh did eventually become a success, particularly in desktop publishing, by the early to mid-90s, Apple was severely losing its way against PCs running Microsoft Windows. By 1996, the situation was absolutely dire. Negative $816 million. That was Apple's staggering net loss for a single fiscal year. The company that literally invented the personal computer was now reportedly hours away from being acquired by competitors just to avoid bankruptcy. They lacked a clear vision, and crucially, they desperately needed a modern operating system.
A massive part of that financial hemorrhage was just total product confusion. Apple's response to the PC threat was to release an endless, confusing maze of Mac models. The Quadra, the Centris, the Performa. Honestly, it sounded more like a lineup of bad sedans than cutting-edge computers. Consumers were completely baffled by the minor technical differences between them, resellers couldn't figure out how to pitch them, Apple's hard-earned reputation for elegant simplicity was just gone, and unsold inventory was literally piling up in warehouses.
Okay, let's shift the energy back up as we enter Chapter 4, the ultimate corporate comeback.
History definitely had a twist in store here. Desperate for a new operating system, Apple looked outward and purchased a company called Next in 1996. And its founder? Steve Jobs. Stepping in as interim CEO to restructure the failing company, Jobs started his rescue mission with a massive dose of humility. At the 1997 Macworld Expo, he told the audience, "We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose." The crucial point is that Jobs recognized Apple wasn't in a position to fight holy wars anymore. They were fighting for sheer survival.
And that realization led to one of the most shocking partnerships in tech history. Apple made a deal with their bitter arch-rival, Microsoft. Microsoft actually committed to releasing Office for the Mac for 5 years and injected $150 million into Apple. In return, Apple settled some patent disputes and made Internet Explorer the default browser on the Mac. This infusion of cash and confidence bought Apple the vital time it needed to trim the fat, simplify their product line, and fundamentally rebuild.
And that sets the stage perfectly for Chapter 5, the mobile revolution.
Let's move to and see how this builds, step by step, because with breathing room secured, Apple began an unprecedented winning streak. First, in 1998, the colorful iMac simplified desktop design and basically saved the company. Then, in 2001, the iPod put 1,000 songs in your pocket, totally dominating portable audio. To feed that device, the iTunes Store in 2003 completely rewired how we buy and distribute media. And then, the absolute masterstroke in 2007, the iPhone. It combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator into one device with a multi-touch screen. They synchronized hardware, software, and digital services flawlessly.
The completion of this comeback was nothing short of historic. Just look at the first quarter of 2011. Microsoft pulled in $5.2 billion in net profit. Apple, they hit $6.0 billion. For the first time in 20 years, Apple had surpassed their old software-dominant arch-rival. The mobile revolution, driven by the iPhone and later the iPad, had fundamentally changed the technology landscape, leaving traditional PC software in the rearview mirror.
Bringing us to the modern era. Chapter 6. Trillions, Silicon, and Scrutiny. After Steve Jobs passed away in 2011, Tim Cook took the helm. Under his leadership, in August 2018, Apple achieved a truly historic milestone, a $1 trillion market capitalization. They continually refined their products, introduced the Apple Watch, transitioned their entire Mac lineup to their own highly efficient Apple Silicon chips, and expanded from just selling devices to integrating users into robust ecosystems through subscription services like Apple Music and iCloud. They had officially become a global financial juggernaut. However, that massive, unprecedented scale has brought intense new challenges. Internally, Apple has navigated employee unrest, including the #Apple2 movement and the first unionizations of their retail stores. Externally, they've faced regulatory action, including fines in 2020 for managing battery decay by slowing down older iPhones, and a $25 million DOJ settlement regarding hiring practices. Presently, they're focused on the artificial intelligence sector, which has led to a major partnership with OpenAI to integrate AI features into their upcoming operating systems.
So we arrive at this really compelling final question. Can Apple maintain its trillion-dollar dominance as it pivots from traditional hardware to the totally unpredictable frontiers of services and AI? They've evolved from a garage hobby into a sprawling global giant, surviving ousters, near bankruptcy, and massive industry shifts. But, as we know, the technology landscape never stops moving. I want to thank you so much for focusing in with me today on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the data, and I will see you on the next one.